The crystalline spires of New Geneva gleamed in the golden light of twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the hopes of humanity's first interstellar peace summit. Sophia Harrison stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic tower, her dark hair catching the light as she watched ships from the Arcanian Empire descend through the atmosphere like falling stars. "Ready for your big moment?" James Harrison approached his daughter, his diplomatic uniform pristine despite the late hour. His weathered face carried the weight of 30 years in human-alien relations, but his eyes sparkled with pride. Sophia smoothed her own ceremonial robes, a blend of Earth's traditional diplomatic attire and Arcanian formal wear. "As ready as I'll ever be. Though I still don't understand why they insisted on bringing Varaxis to the negotiations." The mention of the dragon made James's expression tighten. Varaxis was the Arcanians' most powerful weapon, a beast of legend that had helped them conquer half the known galaxy. Some said it was as old as the stars themselves, with scales like black diamond and eyes that burned with ancient wisdom. "Show of force," James replied, his voice low. "The Arcanians want us to remember who holds the power here." He touched the medallion at his throat, an old family heirloom that had been passed down through generations of Harrisons. "Just stick to the protocol we discussed." The summit chamber was a marvel of architectural engineering, its transparent dome offering a view of the starlit sky above. Representatives from a dozen human colonies sat alongside the towering, reptilian forms of the Arcanian delegation. The air crackled with tension and possibility. High Counselor Drexer, leader of the Arcanian Empire, rose to his full height of 3 meters. His scales shifted from deep purple to midnight blue, a sign of formal authority. "We gather here to discuss the terms of humanity's surrender and integration into our enlightened empire." Sophia felt her father stiffen beside her. This wasn't how the meeting was supposed to begin. The terms they discussed involved partnership, not subjugation. Before anyone could protest, the chamber's massive doors swung open. Varaxis entered, each step shaking the floor. The dragon's scales absorbed light rather than reflected it, creating a void in the shape of a living creature. Its eyes, though, they blazed like captured supernovas. The dragon's gaze swept the room, and when it reached Sophia, something unexpected happened. Varaxis paused, those ancient eyes fixing upon her with an intensity that made her breath catch. In that moment, she felt a resonance, a connection she couldn't explain. Her medallion, identical to her father's, grew warm against her skin. The dragon's eyes widened fractionally, recognition flickering in their depths. "The terms are non-negotiable," Drexer continued, oblivious to the silent exchange. "Humanity will submit, or we will take what we want by force." James stepped forward. "This is not what we agreed to discuss, Counselor. We came here in good faith." "Faith?" Drexer laughed, the sound like grinding stones. "Faith is for species too weak to take what they desire. Guards, seize them. The Harrison bloodline will serve as an example to any who would resist the Empire." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Plasma weapons materialized in Arcanian hands. Human diplomats dove for cover. But Sophia stood transfixed, her eyes still locked with Varaxis's burning gaze. The dragon moved with impossible speed for its size. As guards rushed toward Sophia, Varaxis's tail swept them aside like toys. The beast positioned itself between the Harrisons and the Arcanian forces, its massive body coiled protectively. "Varaxis!" Drexer roared. "What is the meaning of this defiance?" The dragon's response was a sound that shook the chamber, not quite a roar, but something older, something that spoke of stars being born and dying. The medallions at Sophia's and James's throats blazed with blue light. In that moment, Sophia understood. The medallions weren't just family heirlooms, they were keys to a legacy far older than human civilization. A legacy that connected her bloodline to this ancient creature of starlight and shadow. "Run!" James grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the chamber's emergency exit. But Sophia knew they wouldn't make it, not with Arcanian forces converging from all directions. Then Varaxis lowered its massive head, eyes meeting hers once more. The message was clear: choose. Without hesitation, Sophia broke from her father's grip and ran, not away from the dragon, but toward it. She leaped, hands finding purchase on the smooth scales. Behind her, she heard her father follow suit, understanding dawning in his surprised gasp. Varaxis unfurled wings that seemed to capture pieces of the night sky. With a sound like thunder, the dragon launched upward, crashing through the chamber's dome in a shower of crystal and starlight. As they soared into the freedom of open space, Sophia held tight to the creature that had chosen to protect rather than destroy. Below them, New Geneva's warning sirens began to wail. The peace summit had failed, but something far more significant had been born in its ashes, an alliance that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The orbital defense platforms around New Geneva erupted with plasma fire, their targeting systems tracking Varaxis's massive form against the star-studded backdrop. Sophia clung to the dragon's scales, the cold of space held at bay by some inexplicable field emanating from the creature's body. "They're launching interceptors," James shouted over the howling wind. A squadron of Arcanian war vessels emerged from the planet's atmosphere, their engines burning fierce and hot. Varaxis banked hard, its wings carving through space with impossible grace. The dragon's thoughts brushed against Sophia's mind, not in words, but in impressions of starlight and shadow. Ancient memories of a time when dragons and humans had been allies, not enemies. The medallion at her throat pulsed in rhythm with Varaxis's heartbeat. "We need to reach the colonial fleet," she called to her father. "Admiral Thane needs to know about the Arcanians' betrayal." A blast from the nearest interceptor scored Varaxis's flank. The dragon roared, more in anger than pain, and retaliated with a breath weapon that defied physics, a stream of what looked like concentrated starlight that sheared through the attacking ship's hull. The fleets gathered at the Helios waypoint. James responded, his diplomatic calm giving way to tactical precision. "But we'll never make it through the Arcanian blockade." Varaxis's response was immediate and decisive. The dragon accelerated, its massive body beginning to glow with an inner light that Sophia recognized from old family stories, tales of how their ancestors had traveled between stars. "Hold on," she screamed as reality itself seemed to bend around them. The dragon was attempting an ancient form of faster-than-light travel, one that predated human jump drives. Space folded like origami, stars blurring into streams of light. The pursuing ships fell away, unable to match this primordial method of transition. For a moment, Sophia felt as though she could see the very threads that held the universe together. When reality reasserted itself, they were in unknown space. A massive nebula painted the void in shades of purple and gold, its gases swirling around a cluster of asteroids that seemed to have been arranged in a deliberate pattern. Varaxis landed on the largest asteroid, which Sophia now saw bore signs of ancient construction, worn pillars and broken arches that spoke of a civilization long forgotten. The dragon's exhaustion was evident in its labored breathing and dulled scales. "What is this place?" James wondered aloud, sliding from Varaxis's back to examine the ruins. His medallion glowed brightly now, responding to something in the ancient stones. Before Sophia could respond, a holographic message flickered to life, projected from their medallions in tandem. The image showed a human woman in archaic clothing standing beside a dragon that could have been Varaxis's twin. "If you're seeing this," the recording began, "then the legacy of the dragon riders lives on. We were betrayed, forced into hiding, but we knew this day would come. The medallions you wear are more than symbols, they're keys to awakening the full power of the bond between human and dragon." The message continued, revealing an astounding truth: humanity's first ventures into space hadn't been alone. They'd been guided by the dragons, ancient beings who had seen the potential in Earth's young species. The Arcanians hadn't captured Varaxis, they'd enslaved it, using forbidden technology to bind its will. "This is incredible," Sophia breathed, but her wonder was cut short by a distant flash of light. Arcanian ships emerged from jump points, their weapons charging. "They're tracking the medallions," James realized with horror. "We've led them straight to." His words ended in a choked gasp as a precision beam weapon pierced the asteroid's thin atmosphere, striking him squarely in the chest. Sophia screamed as her father collapsed, the medallion at his throat growing dim. Varaxis roared in shared anguish, but they were surrounded. A stasis field deployed from the lead Arcanian ship, powerful enough to hold even a dragon motionless. Sophia felt her connection to Varaxis weaken as the field took hold. High Counselor Drexer's voice boomed across the asteroid's surface. "Thank you for leading us to this sanctuary, young Harrison. Your father's death is only the beginning. The secrets of the Dragon Riders will be ours, and both you and Varaxis will watch as we use them to remake the galaxy." As Arcanian troops moved in to capture her, Sophia clutched her father's still warm medallion alongside her own. In that moment of contact, both artifacts pulsed with renewed energy. A stream of information flooded her mind: coordinates, security codes, and most importantly, the location of other sanctuaries where Dragon Riders had hidden their knowledge. They might have lost this battle, but Sophia swore on her father's body that it wouldn't be the end. Somehow, she would escape. She would find the other sanctuaries, awaken more dragons, and remind humanity of its forgotten alliance with these magnificent creatures. As Arcanian restraints closed around her wrists, Sophia met Varaxis's gaze one final time. In those ancient eyes, she saw not defeat, but patience. They would endure, they would wait, and when the moment was right, they would remind the galaxy why dragons and humans had once been the most feared partnership among the stars. The Arcanian prison fortress on Nexus 7 was designed to break spirits. Sophia sat in her cell, surrounded by walls of dark energy that absorbed both light and sound. But they couldn't dampen the connection she felt with Varaxis, held captive in the vast chamber below. 3 months had passed since her father's death. 3 months of interrogation, of watching the Arcanians attempt to unlock the secrets of the Dragon Riders through brutal experimentation. They'd tried everything to access the knowledge stored in her medallion, but the artifact responded only to Harrison blood. The guard shift changed, bringing Lieutenant Rook to her cell. Unlike the others, his eyes held something besides contempt. "Time for your daily exercise, prisoner." His voice carried a hint of their secret code. In the exercise yard, surrounded by energy barriers that reached into the crimson sky, Rook passed her a water container. Inside was a data crystal containing vital intelligence. A growing resistance movement had emerged within the Arcanian military, young officers who questioned the Empire's brutal methods. "They're moving Varaxis tomorrow," Rook whispered. "High Counselor Drexer himself is coming to oversee the transfer. They've found another sanctuary." Sophia's heart raced. The coordinates she'd received from the merged medallions had revealed the locations of 12 sanctuaries. If the Arcanians reached them first, any hope of awakening the other dragons would be lost. "The resistance is ready," Rook continued. "We have supporters in the engineering core who can temporarily disable the fortress's power grid. When the systems reset." An alarm blared, cutting him off. The exercise yard's barriers flickered as a massive shadow passed overhead. A battlecruiser descended through the clouds, bearing the insignia of the human colonial fleet. "No," Sophia breathed. "They can't be here. It's too soon." The fortress's defense batteries opened fire, filling the sky with plasma bolts. The human ship responded with a barrage that shook the very foundations of the prison. But Sophia knew it was a suicide mission. No single cruiser could hope to breach the fortress's defenses. Unless that wasn't their goal. The ship's attack was focused on a single point, the power distribution hub. Each hit weakened the fortress's energy grid, including the barriers containing Varaxis. Sophia felt the dragon's consciousness surge through their bond, growing stronger as the restraints faltered. All prisoners returned to their cells. Guards rushed into the yard, weapons raised. Rook stepped in front of Sophia, his loyalties finally revealed. "Lieutenant Rook," his commander barked, "step away from the prisoner." "I cannot." Rook's spine straightened. "The Empire has lost its honor. The old ways must return." Plasma fire cut him down before he could say more. Sophia screamed, but her cry was drowned out by something far more powerful, Varaxis's roar of freedom. The dragon burst through the fortress floor, its scales blazing with pent-up energy. In the chaos, Sophia ran to Rook's body. His dying fingers pressed a key card into her hand, along with a whispered location, the Resistance's hidden base. Above, the human cruiser began its death dive, its engines overloading as it crashed into the fortress's main shield generator. Varaxis landed beside her, its wings creating a protective canopy against the debris raining from the sky. Without hesitation, Sophia climbed onto its back, her medallion blazing as their connection surged to full strength. They took to the skies as the fortress erupted in secondary explosions. Through their bond, Sophia shared the coordinates of the Resistance base. But they both knew this was only the beginning. The human cruiser's sacrifice had bought them freedom, but it would also trigger a full-scale war. As they soared through the clouds, Sophia caught glimpses of other ships emerging from hyperspace, the rest of the colonial fleet, arriving to cover their escape. Her father's old friend, Admiral Thane, had risked everything on this rescue mission. Sophia clutched her medallion, which now contained both her father's and her own legacy. "We need to find the other sanctuaries," she told Varaxis. "We need to wake the dragons before Drexer can capture them." The dragon's response resonated through their bond, a vision of ancient battles, of dragons and humans fighting side by side against a darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. History was about to repeat itself, but this time, they would be ready. As Nexus 7 shrunk behind them, Sophia realized that Lieutenant Rook's sacrifice had given them more than just a chance at escape. The existence of an Arcanian resistance meant they weren't fighting alone. The old alliances could be rebuilt, one heart at a time. Varaxis accelerated toward the sanctuary coordinates, its scales beginning to glow with the power of stellar translation. They had a war to win, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other dragons were waiting to be awakened. The ancient sanctuary moon orbited a dying star, its surface carved with symbols that pulsed with remnant power. Sophia stood before a massive door, her medallion hovering before her as its light matched the rhythms of the alien script. Behind her, Varaxis kept watch while Admiral Thane's forces maintained a defensive perimeter in orbit. They'd reached the sanctuary ahead of the Arcanians, but time was running out. The door opened with a sound like a mountain sighing. Inside, suspended in fields of energy, 3 dragons slumbered. Their scales shimmered with different hues, one like burnished copper, another deep emerald, and the third pale as moonlight. "The Arcanian fleet is approaching," Thane's voice crackled through her calm, multiple capital ships detected. "Drexer is leading them personally." Sophia placed her hand on the nearest control panel, her medallion interfacing with the ancient technology. The sanctuary's records flowed into her mind, the truth about the dragon rider's disappearance, and the terrible weapon that had been used to enslave their companions. "They didn't just disappear," she whispered to Varaxis. "They found something out here, something that scared them enough to hide their own dragons away." Through their bond, she shared the vision from the records. The dragon riders had discovered an ancient evil, a force that could corrupt the very essence of the dragon's power. They'd chosen to seal away their greatest allies rather than risk them falling into the wrong hands. The Arcanians had found fragments of this weapon, using it to bind Varaxis. But they didn't understand its true nature or the price of wielding it. A massive explosion rocked the sanctuary. The Arcanian fleet had engaged Thane's forces, their weapons tearing through the human defensive line. Wake them, Voraxis's thoughts pressed into her mind, the first time the dragon had communicated in actual words. Wake them now. Sophia activated the revival sequence, but a warning flashed across the control panel. The process would take time they didn't have. High Counselor Drexer's voice boomed through the sanctuary's communication system. Did you think we wouldn't follow you, young Harrison? Your father died protecting these secrets. Will you do the same? Through the sanctuary's sensors, Sophia watched Drexer's flagship deploy a massive weapon, a crystalline structure that pulsed with corrupted dragon energy. Its power reached out like tentacles, trying to seize control of Voraxis. The dragon roared in defiance, fighting against the ancient corruption. Sophia felt their bond waver under the assault, but she held on, channeling her own strength through the medallion. Your resistance is futile, Drexer continued. The weapon's power grows with each dragon it controls. Once we have these three, nothing will stand against us. The revival sequence reached 60%. The sleeping dragons stirred in their energy fields, their consciousness beginning to reconnect with the world. But the weapon's influence was already seeping into the sanctuary, threatening to corrupt them before they could fully awaken. Sophia made a desperate decision. She removed her medallion and placed it in the control panel's central socket. Father, she whispered, help me one last time. The medallion blazed with impossible brightness. The combined essence of two dragon riders surged through the sanctuary systems, accelerating the revival process but at a terrible cost. The medallion began to crack under the strain. Outside, the space battle reached its crescendo. Admiral Thane's forces fought with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered. Drexer's weapon reached toward the sanctuary with fingers of dark energy. Just as the weapon's corruption was about to breach the inner chamber, the three dragons awoke. Their eyes opened in unison, burning with ancient power and terrible purpose. They recognized the threat immediately, not just Drexer's weapon, but the fundamental wrong of trying to enslave their kind. The pale dragon's roar shattered the sanctuary's remaining seals. The Emerald One's wings spread wide, crackling with energy that neutralized the weapon's dark tendrils. And the copper dragon launched itself toward Drexer's flagship with the fury of a newborn star. Sophia retrieved her medallion, now spiderwebbed with cracks but still faintly glowing. Through her bond with Voraxis, she felt the other dragons' gratitude and their rage at what had been done to their kind. As they soared out of the sanctuary to join the battle, Sophia realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. The weapon Drexer wielded was a fragment of something far worse, something that had haunted the galaxy since before humans looked up at the stars. The true war was just beginning, and its outcome would determine not just the fate of humanity and dragons, but the very future of life in the galaxy itself. The battle above the sanctuary moon had become a crucible of light and shadow. Four dragons danced through space, their ancient power burning against the void. Sophia, still mounted on Voraxis, watched as the copper dragon tore through Drexer's flagship shields like paper. The weapon at the heart of the Arcanian fleet pulsed with increasing desperation, its corrupted energy seeking purchase on the newly awakened dragons. But they were prepared this time, their combined will creating a barrier that the darkness couldn't penetrate. You understand nothing of true power, Drexer's voice boomed across all frequencies. The weapon showed us the truth, dragons were never meant to be partners. They were meant to be tools. The weapon's crystal structure began to fragment, releasing waves of chaotic energy. Sophia's cracked medallion vibrated against her chest, responding to the ancient evil being unleashed. Through their enhanced bond, Voraxis shared a memory, not its own, but one preserved in the sanctuary's records. The corruption had come from between galaxies, an entity that fed on the essence of stellar beings like dragons. The first dragon riders had fought it to a stalemate, sealing away their companions rather than risk them falling to its influence. "Admiral," Sophia called through her comm, "get your ships clear of the weapon's range. This ends now." Thane's fleet pulled back, leaving the space around Drexer's command ship empty except for the 4 dragons. The pale dragon, which Sophia now knew was called Luminara, positioned itself above the weapon. The emerald dragon, Verdant, took the left flank while the copper one, Solaris, covered the right. Varaxis dove toward the heart of the weapon, avoiding torrents of corrupted energy. Through their bond, Sophia coordinated with the other dragons, their ancient powers combining in a way not seen since the first dragon riders. Even if you destroy this weapon, Drexer snarled, its knowledge is already within us. We will build another, and another, until... His words cut off as Sophia's medallion exploded with light. The combined essence of her bloodline, generations of dragon riders distilled into a single artifact, created a resonance with the dragon's power. In that moment of perfect harmony, she understood what had to be done. The corruption can't be destroyed, she broadcast to both fleets. But it can be transformed. The 4 dragons moved in perfect synchronization, their powers forming a tetrahedron around the weapon. Sophia raised her medallion, now glowing white-hot, and spoke the words she found in her father's final memories. From shadow to light, from bondage to flight, we choose to rise. The weapon's crystal shattered, releasing its ancient evil in a torrent of dark energy. But instead of spreading outward, it was caught in the dragon's pattern. The corruption that had been meant to enslave them became the very thing that linked them together, transformed by the combined will of dragons and humanity. Drexer's flagship tried to flee, but Solaris's tail smashed through its engines. The great ship hung dead in space as the wave of transformed energy washed over it. When it passed, the Arcanian vessel's crew found themselves touched by the same connection that bound Sophia to Varaxis, not as masters, but as potential partners. The Resistance members in the Arcanian fleet seized their moment. Ships turned on each other as the old guard fought against those who embraced the new connection. But the outcome was inevitable. One by one, the Arcanian vessels surrendered. Hours later, Sophia stood in the sanctuary's central chamber, surrounded by both human and Arcanian leaders. Her medallion, though cracked, still pulsed with power. The dragons perched around them, their presence a reminder of the change that had swept through the galaxy. The dragon riders didn't fail, she addressed the assembly. They showed us the way. The corruption couldn't be destroyed because it was never meant to be destroyed. It was meant to be changed, just as we all must change. The Arcanian resistance leaders, led by those who had felt the dragon's touch, stepped forward to sign a new treaty. Not of surrender, but of partnership. The age of empire was over. The age of the dragon riders had returned. As Sophia mounted Varaxis once more, ready to seek out the remaining sanctuaries, she felt her father's presence in the medallion's fading light. He would have been proud, not just of her, but of all those who had chosen to rise above their darker natures. The dragons launched into space, their wings catching starlight as they prepared for stellar translation. There were more sanctuaries to find, more dragons to awaken, and a new future to build. Together, they soared toward the dawn of a new age, one where the boundaries between species fell away, and the true power of partnership lit the way forward.